Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Legal voters of the town of Elmore.
Guys in the back.
I don't have my gavel with me. Hereby warned and notified to meet at the Methodist Church on the 22nd of February between the hours of 6 and 7. This will be an hour meeting. And Article 3, which is what we're talking about tonight, is shall the voters of the town of Elmore approve the withdrawal of the town of Elmore from the Lamoille South Unified Union School District to become its own separate school district. We will have one speaker who will speak for the withdrawal. And will and there will be a question and answer period, both live and Zoom. Total time of the informational meeting will be an hour. Remainder of the meeting will be devoted to question and answers. Anyone attending the meeting in person will be required to wear a mask and social distance. Hand sanitizer will be provided to clean hands before and after the meeting. Only registered voters in the town of Elmore can ask a question. Each speaker will be allowed 15 minutes. Hopefully they won't take all of that time. That's not here. That's just editorial comment. Zoom questions will be allowed only by registered voters in the town of Elmore. All Zoom questions will have to be submitted in the chat box. The meeting will be recorded on Zoom. Sharon Draper and Jill Lindenmeyer will check voter registration at the door and on Zoom. Caroline DeVore will monitor the chat box and present questions. Rob Wills will monitor the time for each speaker. Glenn Schwartz will keep the minutes of the meeting, and a video of the meeting will be available at the Elmore website. Okay, so we have a speaker in favor of the withdrawal. Is that correct? Okay, come on up. Right here. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
I've never stood up here before. This changes the whole scene. Wow, it actually makes me a little bit more nervous to stand up here. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Alan Van Anda. I'm a resident of the great town of Elmore. I have two children in the school system currently. I have a fourth grader and a kindergartner. At this point in time, we just finished grades 1 through 3 with my son at the Elmore school. And I can very easily say that it was one of the greatest moments of my parenting career, for lack of better words. We're out of the Elmore school right now for this year, and I can't wait for next year for my daughter to start first grade. Give you a quick bit of history here. The reason why I am involved in this conversation at this point in time is it was brought to my attention back in the summer that when the schools were merged, the Elmore school, the building and the grounds became ownership and under the control of the Lamoille South Supervisory Union. So what that means is that the residents of Elmore basically don't have a say on the school or the property that school sits on. It's no longer ours. So in our little downtown here, as I look out the window, the little corner of 4 places we have, one of them we really have no say on. Now, as we all know, watching the news and being part of this community, we almost lost our post office. None of us ever thought that would happen, and we came very close to that happening. So I think the conversation that we're here tonight to discuss about the future of the Elmore School is a very real possibility, and it's something we all have to take very seriously. The reason why we believe there's a group of parents and community members that got together starting in the summer to begin discussing how we can protect the Elmore School, what steps need to be taken, what the current unified union looks like, and what the repercussions might be upon our community, given that we have one vote on a school board. We all know that Stowe has voted to leave the unified union, and we allowed that vote to happen. So now we have an opportunity to see if Elmore residents want to take back control of our educational future for our children and for the feel, the look, and the health of our downtown. So the reason why I am here tonight is to kind of take a very, very broad global view as to what happens if we vote yes and if we vote no. Very simply, if we vote no, we lose all say, all control. We no longer have a voice. If we vote yes, nothing happens quickly. We won't be here making major decisions overnight. It's a long process. But what the yes vote allows us to do is to get together as community members, as neighbors, and talk amongst ourselves to decide the future of our school and the children's education within. And that, I believe, is the most important opportunity that we have facing us. We have the ability to take back control, to create our own school board, to create our own future and our own destiny. There's been a lot that's gone back and forth with this. We all know there's a long history here, and I'm not here to drag up the history. I'm here to talk about the future. And what we really, really need to identify is that at this point in time, we have a wonderful working relationship with the Lamoille South School. It's been a long history. We do, in many regards, want to keep that history and that tradition. But what we are asking and what we are hoping for is that the residents of Elmore have greater say and greater control as what happens with our children and with that relationship. Currently, we have one voice on a board. When Stowe leaves, if Stowe leaves, there may be some restructuring. We're still not sure yet. But what we need to do is we need to have the ability to have our voices heard. A no vote is the ability for our voices to be heard. A yes vote gives us the opportunity, as I said, to talk amongst ourselves as community members and as neighbors, and try to find a path forward that works for everyone. We have a lot of information that is out there. We have the Unified Union Articles of Agreement. There's a lot of solid facts that we can all discuss. I'm not going to weigh you down. We only have 15 minutes. I'm going to stay on a high level here, and we can nail down into the facts as we need to as we move forward with questions and answers. But there is solid information out there. There are solid facts that demonstrate that if we do not vote to remove ourselves from the Unified Union, that there's a distinct possibility that our school will be closed. There's a distinct possibility that we will lose the building that is one of 4 buildings that make up our downtown. That's really what the big thing here is. We've gone back and forth with what ifs, and the what ifs are huge. There are a million what ifs. There will always be a million what ifs. But the what ifs have such greater impact on us if we don't have a say in deciding what the answer to what ifs are. So therefore, I'm going to keep it brief. I'm going to say, there's one other thing I do want to say, is that the Vermont that we know that we're used to is changing. We're seeing things change quickly. Education is changing. Our rural landscape is changing. And there is a movement to really suburbanize education, to consolidate, to find ways where children, you take all one age group, you put them all together, you put them all from different towns. One of the reasons that we have such an amazing community, an amazing rural character, are our small independent schools. And that's something where many of you in this room, I'm sure, went to a small school, potentially a one-room schoolhouse here. And as we see mergers and consolidations and pushing everyone together into a one-size-fits-all form of education, we know, the people that went to a one-room school, that went to a small schoolhouse, we know that it doesn't work for everyone. And we deserve to give our children the opportunity to have that choice, to have their voices heard, to have us as residents heard, and to hopefully protect the last one-room schoolhouse in the state of Vermont, and a major component to the feel and culture of our community. With that, I will step aside about half my time and look forward to your questions. And thank you so much for the opportunity tonight. B-A-N. Yep, space, capital A-N-D-A.
You said L-L-E-N or
A-L-L.
Yeah,
A-L-L-E-N.
great, thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. All right, and now speaking on the other side, please.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Alan. My name is Warren West. I'm sure some of you know that. I've been in this town now for 20 some odd years, raised both of my children here. They both went to PA and graduated high school from there. My wife is a fourth grade teacher at Morrisville Elementary School. I spent 30 years in healthcare, the last 20 of which as a CEO of small rural hospitals in Vermont, New Hampshire, and had the pleasure and honor of serving in that role at Copley Hospital for 6.5 years. Just a point of clarification. I don't think anybody in this town wants the Elmore School to close or wants to lose that building's control. But I think if we understand the facts, no matter what happens with the relationship we have with LSUU, Elmore, the town of Elmore, if that relationship would deteriorate and fall apart, the town of Elmore has the ability for $1 to buy the school back and own the school. Elmore School is not in jeopardy of being taken away from Elmore. I think that's got to be really clear. We got to make sure we understand the facts behind this issue. What I do want to talk about is why we need to take this vote today. Why is this vote so important today when we don't have any plans or facts about what the implications are behind the petitioner's concepts? Every other ballot initiative that is on our ballot this year that affects the budget has a detailed explanation of what it means. We know how much the town garage is going to cost. We know what it's going to look like. We know its effect on our taxes. We know how much this town budget's going to cost. We know what it's going to affect our taxes. We know what the school board's budget is going to cost and what its effect on our taxes. This is the one vote that's going to affect 70% of our property taxes, and we have no clue what it means. Why do we need to rush into this vote today? We can vote tomorrow, we can vote the next day, but there's so many moving parts today that we don't know. Why would we want to introduce more moving parts? We don't know what's going to happen to Stowe. We don't know what's going to happen with the state regulators. We don't know what the case study in Ripken, what's going to happen with Ripken. We have a new school board being developed, right? They have elections now, and hopefully our citizen, Anne Marie, will be elected on that board. We have a new superintendent who has a different view. We've got to let all these pieces fall into place before we make this really drastic decision. The door is open and will always be open. The last thing I think we want to do is take a vote and close our options off and say we're leaving the school district that we loved all that time before we know the ramifications. It might be the right answer. I don't know. But what I do know is we should have a plan in place before we take that kind of vote. Folks were worried about this H-493 bill that is in the Capitol. That bill, unlike what we've heard before, that bill does not prevent any town from leaving their school district. In fact, it provides a roadmap to do that. So don't think this is the last opportunity we can have to take this vote. This vote is premature and is not ready. Save our school. That's a major theory we've been hearing all along. We've got to save Elmore. I say, save Elmore from who? Who and why is Elmore School in jeopardy? Let's think about this logic. Is there a logical, operational, financial, or political reason the school is going to get closed by the school board? Let's see. The school runs at full capacity all the time. The school is financially very sound in its operations. The school is in a local neighborhood where children are that attend it, so they don't have to get on long bus routes. And most importantly, and the board knows this, Ryan knows this, our town knows this, the school does a great job with our children. It's an experience they can't get anywhere else. There is no logical reason that this Elmore School is in jeopardy. This to me is a false narrative. So I'd ask yourself, is Elmore School more protected by being part of a larger school district? Or do we put the school at risk when we are the sole standing smallest school district in the state with a one-room schoolhouse and 19 students? What do you think the answer is? Only you can decide that in your mind. But I know what I'm thinking. I want to save the school. It is premature for us to take this vote now and move forward without a plan. The petitioners the other day, thank goodness, put a 3-step proposal in place, what they call their action plan. They claim it is not complicated and there's not a lot of variables associated with this conversion. I say their action plan is in reverse. They say their first step is to take a vote for separation. I say the first step, if this is really the majority of what the majority of the people in this town want, is we need to put that committee together. That committee then needs to do the work to find out what the plans are, the budget is, the implementation plan. Then as a town, we have the knowledge, we have the education, we know the plan, and we can have a vote, 2 votes, right? The same day. We can vote on that budget, we can vote on that implementation plan, and we can vote to separate the school district. We will need wraparound services, right? Our teacher can't do everything. We will need to contract wraparound services. Why would we possibly want to burn our bridges with Lamoille Supervisory Union and take this vote before we take the time to do our homework, before we go to the board and say, would you consider providing us with these wraparound services? Before we gamble with our school, with our taxes, and our students. If we're going to do this, let's do this in a proper way. Let's not have our doors closed behind us before we ask the questions. This is a real big deal. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. All I'm trying to say is, let's slow down. Let's take the right decisions at the right point in time so we can make educated decisions about our students in our school. I've also heard from the petitioners that they think we can escape paying for major capital improvements by forming a separate school district. If you understand basic accounting principles, we will pay for those renovations one way or the other. If our children attend Morrisville High School after these renovations are done, or Stowe High School after these renovations are done, we will be paying for those expenses through the tuition we pay every year. We cannot escape that practicality. It is a reality. Let's understand false narratives and reality. What have we learned from Ripton? They took this vote without a plan. Here they sit 2 years later. They don't have any options. They went back after they divorced from their school district to ask that school district if they provide wraparound services. What do you think the answer was? Why would they? They're busy moving their school district forward. They don't have time or energy to focus on that. We don't have extra resources in school districts to do that. You've got to do that step before you take the vote. What else has happened in Ripton? So then Ripton went to the state and asked the Vermont Board of Education, will you make our old school district provide us with wraparound services? The state said, no, you were on your own. Let's not go down that same road. Let's learn from another town. Let's see what happens with them. I'm not saying this is a good idea or bad idea. I'm just saying we're not doing it in proper order if this is what the majority of the citizens want in town. And for anybody to suggest that similarities of Ripton and Elmore, and if they can do it to Ripton, they can do it to Elmore, please, apples to orange comparisons. Ripton is a school of 50. It barely is 50% capacity of that Elmore at that school. Therefore, it's not running efficiently. The old school district had 6 other elementary schools in their region that these students could attend. We don't have that situation here. So don't let anybody tell you if it can happen in Ripon, it can happen in Elmore. It's apples to oranges comparison. How much time do I have? Thank you. Let's talk a little bit, if you will, about concepts that we've heard for the last 6 months about the sense of community. How do we bring a sense of community to Elmore? Well, I think the last thing we want to do is have school choice to bring that sense of community to Elmore. So why do I say that? Well, when my kids were growing up, we would go to the campus, the school campus in Morrisville. They would see their friends. We'd be on the soccer fields. We'd be in the auditoriums. We'd have dinners at schools. We'd have breakfasts at schools. We'd do fundraisers for schools. And our kids were always together. School choice, which I think, I'm sorry to say, but is a primary driver for a lot of people behind this concept. School choice will make a bedroom community of our students. They can go to every school they want in the state. They won't have a single campus to go to. They won't have a sense of community. The only sense of community we're going to have is a 1, 2, and 3rd grades in Elmore. And as soon as they leave that school, they're going to go all throughout the state. Is that really the sense of community we want? There are always trade-offs and decisions. There's always intended consequences and unintended consequences that we need to study before we take this really important decision that can affect our town forever. So I ask you, why do we need to vote now? Why is it so imperative that we need to vote now? The other thing I would suggest is we don't need to vote yes now to start the committee that my friend Alan suggests. We can do all of that homework without taking the vote and still leave doors open for us. There is no reason we have to vote first. Start the committee. Elect, by the way, elect committee representation. I was very concerned the other day when I read the petitioners think that we can informally select these people and have the select board vote them in. What happened to democracy in Elmore? Don't we all get a chance? Isn't it important to have an independent elected committee put these plans together? So I will end with that for now. And I'm very happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So it's time for questions, but before we do the question and answers, our superintendent, Brian, come on up. Sure.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I will be brief. Really, I'm here to answer any questions that you might have for, about procedural impact of this. And at the last meeting, I shared some information really pertaining to the Stowe withdrawal vote, which I think is really relevant to this vote as well. At the time, Stowe had gotten a legal opinion from the Agency of Education, whether or not that vote was actually legal. The Agency of Education said that it was not. The Stowe had obtained its own legal opinion, and they had said that it was legal. And so they went forward with that vote. That vote took place, and it was approved by the town voters, and then it was also ratified by Elmore and Morristown. From there, the question that we had brought up in December, what I had pointed out that the Agency of Education has shared with me over the summer, they did not think it would be taken up by the State Board of Ed. To date, it has not taken up the vote. And so we're not really sure how that is going to work out. We do know that the state is putting forward legislation to, as Warren had mentioned, they are refining legislation to define a clear process for when a town would like to withdraw from a unified union school district. Through that process, what they are hoping is that it would involve a clear review of what the outcomes would be of withdrawing from the district, how that would impact taxes, how that it would impact educational quality, and what the long-term ramifications of that decision would be. So that is what the state is currently working on, is refining that legislation. So from a procedural standpoint, I think it's important for the public to know that even if this vote does go through and it is approved, there's no guarantee that the Board of Ed will take that up and make a determination as to whether or not the district would be reconfigured from a governance standpoint. Another thing that I think is important to recognize is that Stowe put forward their withdrawal vote. Their intention of the petitioners is to return to the structure that was in place prior to the forced consolidation. The main argument that I have heard from those petitioners around that is really about capital improvement. Their hope is to have a separate district, and so they can put forward a capital improvement bond to improve the schools. There's some pretty significant upgrades that need to take place there, and that is the main reason. So it's not really pertaining to educational quality isn't the biggest concern. It's more about control over the budget and the capital improvement process to return to the two separate districts and two separate boards. So that's just some context that I hope is helpful for people. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. I also, since I have this opportunity, I just want to thank our amazing teacher, Mrs. Nichols, and also Ms. Bellevant, who works in that classroom. I was up there the other day. We had a journalist from Boston that is coming up to do an article about how special the Elmore School is. I just want to say, as the principal of the Elmore School and the superintendent, I am very proud to be the principal of that school, the last one-room schoolhouse in the state, and I think it's an extremely special place. And that's what I shared with the journalists that came up to talk about the school. So it is an incredible place, and I hope when COVID restrictions ease a little bit more, we can get even more community members in the school, spend time with the kids, to read books, just do all the things that you probably have done for years and years that haven't been as prevalent over the last couple of years. So that's all that I wanted to share today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thanks, Warren. So does the select board have a preference whether we start with a Zoom question or a live question?
We're just gonna go back and forth.
Okay.
So let's see if we have two questions on Zoom waiting, but let's see if we have a local question. And can you just remind everybody what the rules are for how much time?
Yes, you get 2 minutes for each question and the response. So
And I just want to ask one clarifying point. There are some questions that are only directed at one side of the argument or the other. So we're going to direct the questions to who is being asked versus making sure, everybody gets to jump in on the question.
And if you're in the audience, if you come up and use a microphone, people at home can hear you and it'll show up on our video. So whoever's coming
and
up,
that mic is live as well, right?
that we can select.
Okay.
Yeah, that's going to be.
Okay. And your little ticket is going to say whether you're a registered voter. Okay.
Okay. Alan, come on.
As quick as I can. Okay. Okay, Ryan, this one's for you. Mr. West mentioned false narratives and renovations affecting and impacting tuition. Could you please clarify? It's our understanding that the state sets tuition for feeder schools. Is that it's at a state? So rather Stowe did $1 billion bond or not, it wouldn't impact the district. Has that changed? So it used to be set at a state level?
Based on district by district.
District by district. And so if Stowe were to do a large bond investment, would our tuition rate go up to offset that?
I'd be speculating if I said yes or no on that.
I'm trying, yeah, you know what I mean? I'm trying to get to the false narrative statement, you know, to try to help everyone understand that.
I think it would be interesting. The way I answer it would be interesting to look at districts that have had recent capital improvement
Mhm.
and have an effective tuition rate. I don't have that information in front of me, so I have to do a little bit of research on it.
Okay, so but I mean, it's relatively fair to say that we're not really talking about false narratives here. We're just talking about a lot of moving parts. As you mentioned in the past, it's hard to actually pinpoint the exact cost that this will be. It's hard to actually pinpoint the exact tax implications that'll be coming out of this, all of it, correct?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of variables there that would go into this. There's a lot of variables that would go into this, and that's why the state's trying to refine the process for determining whether or not a district will be allowed to withdraw. So that's been their perspective around refining the legislation.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to say from now on, whoever uses that mic should take it off the stand and put it close to your mouth, okay? Now, Zoom, okay.
So this. They can ask. So Michelle Greason has a question. It is directed to the expert. If we leave, can you actually guarantee school choice?
So is anyone, so who would like to answer that? Warren, you want to take that?
So the best answer is no. That would be determined by this committee in their plans. And then it would have to go to the electorate.
It was. I just asked that.
Most people can respond.
So the answer is, sorry for the interruption. The answer is that would be determined by the committee and then ultimately determined by the new school board and then ultimately determined by the voters of Elmore. It is an option. It is an option, but it is not precluded as the only option.
Okay, quickly, yeah.
My understanding is.
Would you let her by?
Oh, my husband's killing me here. Okay, my understanding is that the school choice issue, one of the drivers of Act 46 was the issue of burgeoning expenses in our schools. And so the state was interested in having a structure where cost containment could become more of a reality for all of our public schools in the state of Vermont. And an increase in student outcomes was also the driver. The school choice issue, I do not believe is decided at the local level. I believe that that really becomes a statewide decision by the State Board of Education. I may be mistaken, but I have worked in public school. I've been an administrator in public schools for all my career. And my understanding is that the school choice issue is not decided at a local level. Sharon, are you waving your hand? No, you might know.
Well, I think we've actually gone over the 2 minutes for the question and the response. So do you want another question, sir?
Yes.
Stand up and introduce yourself.
Come to the microphone. Thanks.
I'm Bruce Malcolm. I agree with Warren. It's handled at the district level. It's a controversial topic, I think, in the state. There are still towns that have school choice in Vermont. The towns have decided to have that. Elmore lost school choice in the merger. Other towns have taken other approaches and maintained it. So yeah, it's not mandated at the state level. I wouldn't say that they're generally supportive of it because sometimes that money doesn't, kind of travels with people and might go to a different institution. But yeah, it's a district issue.
Okay, thank you. So is there another question now?
There's another question
On Zoom? Okay.
So this is, give me 1 second. It's not directed at a particular site, so maybe you can hear from both sides. The petitioners have suggested in their action plan, if this vote passes, we would create an Elmore School Planning Committee, which would be informally nominated and presented to the select board. Why do the petitioners, so this is to the petitioners, why do the petitioners feel it's appropriate to informally nominate instead of holding a vote to elect members of this would-be committee? Colin, and Colin Kennedy, could somebody, I just don't know, is Colin Kennedy a registered voter? Yes. Okay, good to go, perfect.
Is there a petitioner who would like to answer that question?
I think that'd be fine. There's no, I mean, I think the fact is that it would be a group of people who were interested in doing it. If it was voted on, if it was the select board looked at a group of people, or I don't think that there's a particular model that we're married to, but it's just getting interested people that would want to, spend the time and were inquisitive and want to do the work. So it's fine.
Yeah, no, sorry, absolutely.
Stuart Wepler. I'm a ex school board member, and we went through this process 7 years ago. I was elected to the school board specifically to look at the issues of tax increases versus school choice. And instead of going ahead and making a decision, we had the 3 members of the school board form a committee with outside, with other people from the town. And we looked, it took us 2 years to come up with our recommendation to have a unified union with Morrisville. And we looked at everything. We looked at other supervisory districts. We looked at independents. We did everything, and we reported back to the Elmore population 3 times and had straw votes on this. So by the time that we actually had a vote, everybody was involved with the process and they knew exactly what we were going to do. And we opted for the unified union in order to reduce our taxes. And we sacrificed school choice for that. And that was a decision that the town made the second time by an overwhelming vote.
Thank you, Stuart.
Just on that, Stuart.
Can you
First
step
vote-
up to the mic, please? Thank you.
And after all that, the first vote, the town voted no.
The
So-
second one
right.
was overwhelming when people figured out
Well,
what we were talking about.
let's not drag that back up because that's a hard topic, right?
You just did.
Well, I mean, that's the truth.
Okay,
You don't vote week before Christmas.
You scared?
Oh, my God.
okay, thank you, gentlemen. Yes, okay. Be quick because
Yes.
we're
think everything Stuart said is true, but it's 7 years later. We've seen the results of Act 46. And quite honestly, there's dissatisfaction with the results.
I'm sorry.
At
this
some
isn't a
level.
Question about how you're gonna get the committee together. This is the question is, should the committee be appointed by the petitioner or voted on? Let's stick to the facts.
I think, as I said, either way is fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, another question. Is there a question here? On Zoom? Okay,
To the yes group, if we, and actually she has to, to the yes group, if we split, will we lose all bus transportation to surrounding schools and to the Elmore School?
To be determined.
So does the yes group want to come and answer that question at the microphone for the people who asked it, or do we, because I don't want, so I'm just gonna say, I don't want this session to devolve into, from the pews, people start answering. It gets directed, we need someone to get up, come to the microphone and answer the question for the people on Zoom. For the folks who are on Zoom, they can't hear when we answer questions from the pews. So if someone wants to answer the question, come to the microphone, both sides get a chance to answer. I'm just asking that we not answer from our seats in the
Right.
pews, come to the microphone.
Thank you.
2 minutes.
I believe we all agree that that would be to be determined. A lot of the concept here is to create conversation and allow the opportunity for different points of view to be heard and renegotiate the relationship that we have.
I would agree with my friend Alan. I would also add that last time we had school choice, transportation was not an option. How do you have transportation for kids going all over the state? It's easy to set up bus routes if you're going to one place. But if they're going to a variety of schools, it becomes cost prohibitive.
okay. Yes,
I do believe that when we had school choice, transportation was still provided to Morrisville.
No, please.
wait.
To the Elmore. Can we have a
Does
little
someone
conversation
have
here?
an opposing view? They need to step up to the microphone.
Thank you.
School choice was not to Elmore. That's why they had bus routes. When kids went to St. Johnsbury Academy, when kids went to Stowe, when kids went to other schools outside of Morrisville and Elmore, they had to find their own way. Believe me, I was in that boat. I chose Morrisville.
Just for clarification, that's just what I said. I said bus service was provided to Morrisville. That's just what I said, just to be clear.
Okay. It's time for another question. Is there one? Does she have another question? Any live questions here? Okay. Did you have, yes, sir. Please introduce yourself.
Don Valentine. I don't know whether I'm confused or just trying to get something straight here. 50 years ago, when the Oxbow School District was formed in Bradford, with Bradford, Newbury, Fairleigh, and Corinth, and they were facing a major project by building a new high school. Then, before construction started, Corinth and Fairleigh decided to pull out. And that whole thing went to court. And it was decided that as long as they pulled out or voted to pull out before construction was started, that would be allowed. But as I understand it, Stowe was looking for a major construction project, renovation or whatever at this point, and so is Morristown. So if those construction projects start and Elmore has not pulled out, it sounds to me like Elmore is going to be responsible for paying for a good part of that construction project, at least in Morrisville, whether or not they pull out afterward. Does anybody have any
All right.
experience to answer that?
Anyone have an educated opinion?
Mike, okay to use?
Now it is.
Yeah, okay. I can comment on that. And so there's a, just so people know, there's a capital improvement subcommittee that's been formed to look at all of the buildings in the district. We are still hoping to recruit someone from Elmore. So if anyone is interested to be on that, we've tried to recruit unsuccessfully, but we would love to have somebody from Elmore on that subcommittee. And with that, the hope is to put a bond forward next year after looking at all the different schools and what the capital improvement needs are. So it would be something that would be brought to the community and something that would be voted on. So there's no guarantees on that right now. There's still a very long process away.
And if I may ask, though, to get back to Mr. Valentine's point, if we are still part of the school district and Morrisville has a bond initiative, we will only be paying our percentage of that bond based on the school population who uses that building, just like we do presently with expenses. So it's not like we get hit with all of that expense. We'd be paying for our percentage if we're still in the school district.
Okay, yes, Ryan, go ahead.
I would say that prior to the bond going out, I think there would have to be a lot of transparency around what those costs would be and how that would be translated to the taxpayers. And I have not done the homework on that yet because we don't have a bond. We don't know what those costs would be and how that would play out. And so I'm not 100% confident about what that would look like for Elmore taxpayers. So I'd be hesitant to confirm or deny.
No, wait, if you want to speak, you need to step to the mic. Thank you.
So would it necessarily be a percentage of the population as Mr. West suggests?
I would have to do some more homework on that.
Thanks.
Okay. How are we zooming?
We have one more question on this. Again, it's Michelle Grace. If we split, won't we lose all representation altogether in our children's schooling grades 4 to 12? Sure, one person on a school board isn't the best, but at least it's better than zero representation. So can someone from the yes side talk about representation 4 to 12?
And say your
Yeah,
name.
right. So I'm Casey Burkowski. Part of why we don't consider ourselves we were just a group of citizens who 7 months ago started to say this is important as we really dug into the articles of agreement and the facility best use study. So right, if we vote yes to unmerge from the unified union, then that means that we would have to, so in the action plan, start the process. First, there would be a vote of the ratification. Morrisville would have to let us out. And then we would to generate, if Warren wants to be part of the committee, anybody, the town would have to say, okay, so how do we start our process again of eventually voting in a school board? So no, we would regain, as the Elmore Independent School, we would regain a school board of our own, rather than share a school board with the Unified Union. We would become a Elmore Independent School. And I think this is really important because I didn't really understand it. I mean, it took a lot of really it's a simple definition, but it really makes a big difference. In a unified union, we share a board. So we have the one member from the Elmore town, the Elmore community, and then Stowe has 3 and Morrisville has 3. So we share the board. And at any point, depending on the swaying of what, if Stowe wants their bonds, but in the end, and this was anyway, so the answer is we would have our own board again. And we would hopefully rejoin, not hopefully, we would have a supervisory union, because if the Stowe and Morrisville vote to ratify and let us out, and we go through our process, right, none of this would happen fast, then we're allowed to, the state says Morrisville would have to join again with someone. We would have to join again. So we would look to become a supervisory union once again, not a unified union. And as a supervisory union, our board can have, an Elmore board can hear the representation from Elmore citizens, and then speak to the unified union,
Okay.
the boards of Morrisville,
Thank
so
you.
on.
Your time is up.
I have a question myself, so should I sit then?
Well, in a minute. Hold on. Did you have, was there one over here? Oh, answer the question. Okay.
So to answer Michelle directly, it depends. Sorry. It depends what the new Elmore School Board decides. But in theory, this new Elmore School Board, in my understanding, would only have authority over the 19 kids in the Elmore school. If everybody else gets tuitioned out of that school district, you will lose all say where your kids get tuition to. You will have the ability to choose where they go, but you will not be able to officially influence those boards in any way, shape, or form because you're out of district students.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or, yeah,
I could just add the comment that that is a correct scenario if there was school choice. If the new school board chose to designate a school, that would be a different scenario.
okay,
And that's another possibility.
thank you. Stuart?
This is just a follow-up on what Warren just talked about of having a vote for the Elmore School District, which really does activities only for the Elmore School and nothing else, and the rest of the students are tuition. One of the advantages, even though we've heard this argument straight through that we only have one vote, well, one vote out of 7, if anybody had shows up to a school board meeting, you would understand the routine, mundane activity that goes into deciding what's going to happen to your children over the next year or two. And it's not so much the vote, because most votes end up being consensus. It's the discussion that goes on in that meeting to give all different sides. And Elmore's voice is just as important as the other 6 people if we have the right person on there.
Okay. Thank you. Come on, one more. Yep. Trying to alternate sides.
This question is for Ryan. Just curious, is this the facility best use study null and void currently?
Yeah.
So it's null and void, even though still hasn't been let out.
So the school board made a public statement on that.
Ryan, would you mind stepping up?
Wonderful. Good to hear it.
The school board made a public statement. I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because it's something that I see a lot. That's a bit frustrating. So the school board made a public statement that they did not want to pursue any of the findings that were in that facilities report.
So that's great. We paid for it though, as taxpayers, and the future will likely be, so now you have a committee, but Elmore doesn't have you're looking to forming a group? Tell me again.
So
But
we have
Elmore doesn't
a
have
we have a
representation.
capital improvement subcommittee that has been touring all of the buildings and is looking at what building needs should be taking place over the next, over the next few years.
Okay, according to our current articles of agreement, Article 3B and Article 4 speak to reconfigurations of grades and school closure. So basically, is it still true though, that right now, after the 2020-21 school year, that there can be reconfiguration? Prior stipulations were, according to this, that this Elmore school was not, it wouldn't be satisfactory to keep it open for the sake of the whole unified union because the building couldn't house an entire grade of the unified union, meaning it couldn't hold 100 kids, which would represent all of a first grade. So it wasn't because the building was in poor condition, et cetera, or wasn't financially, in a good place. It was because it couldn't house an entire grade. So hence the reconfiguration. an idea around building new buildings in Morrisville, capital improvement projects, building new buildings in Morrisville or Stowe, reconfiguring grades, busing, closing the Elmore school, busing all of the Elmore students, to Morrisville or Stowe, depending on the reconfiguration. So in the end, is that still true though, that the articles of agreement state that that can happen? And it's that the electorate, the group of Elmore voters, Morrisville voters, and Stowe voters would vote to potentially close a building.
So there's a lot in that question that
There
you just
is.
mentioned. So
Yeah.
it's important to note that when that facilities use study was done, transportation was not taken into account. So that when you start taking transportation into account in that facilities report,
they
that's why it's null and void. It makes no sense.
Great, because
So to
we
send
all
people
were like,
from Elmore to Stowe Elementary
Right.
on a bus for, an
Nuts.
hour a day, send people from
Agreed.
Moscow to Morristown, it makes no sense.
Right.
So that's why the school board looked at it and said, this doesn't make any sense.
Okay, thank you both.
Great.
We have about 5 minutes left. So is there another Zoom question? For a change?
Should we have some participation?
Yeah, good.
As for the concern for the physical building itself, is the school building a historic site? I believe she means is the Elmore School, and Michelle, you can text, but I think she's asking, is the Elmore School building a historic site?
Does anybody,
But while we're answering, is the Morrisville School building a historic site? Some people have, that comment, I thought it was a joke. But is it a historic building?
does anyone know for sure without speculating? Yes, Ron.
Said early in this school year, there was a request to our business manager and to myself asking what the impact would be if the store was put into a historic district. And so from there, we did a little bit of research. So that area has not been in a historic district right now. So that's my understanding.
Okay. Any questions from here or from Zoom? Oh, yes, yeah, please.
My question, I'm Cheryl Schwartz, Elmore resident. My question is kind of hypothetical, but possibly history can answer. If school choice were to be approved for Elmore, if we separate, if we have school choice, who determines how much tuition can get spent per child? If somebody wants to send their kid to a school that has a tuition of $60,000, is it an automatic they go? Is there a cap? Who would make that determination? Thank you.
Sounds like a superintendent's question.
It defers, my understanding is that it defers to the state average. So if the state average is 14,000 per student, that is the cap. 7. Yeah, so the state has a set tuition that's on average.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions, either from here or on Zoom? Looks like not. Is that true? Oh, okay. Okay, yes. Is this a question? Okay,
For Warren or for Stewart, we've been told that, and we've looked at the Wolcott School District as a comparative model, but we've been told that there is no primary documentation that can be provided to show that independent school districts have higher, that will pay more necessarily as compared to being part of a unified union. Meaning the narrative around the yes vote 7 years ago, being people being told in the town that our taxes would, go up. Well, our taxes are going up. That happens. It's going to happen. Like you said, because of capital improvement, meaning we're going to be responsible for it no matter what. But whether the reality of what the research I've done shows that basically if we're part of the Elmore Independent, if we're Elmore Independent School or part of the Unified Union, our taxes are going to be about the same. Right now, the estimated per our Elmore Town Report page 20, the estimated tax rate for next year is 1.65% for Elmore. And Wolcott is the same or similar. They're per pupil. So Wolcott tuitions their students, to Orly. Anyway, the point is they're an independent school still. Their per pupil equalized spending is $18,134. Our proposed per pupil spending for LSUU on the budget right now goes to, ours is 18,134 is our proposed, whether or not we're going to approve that for these initial improvements in Morrisville for their facilities. And then Wolcott's is right. Anyway, somewhere around $700 more than ours.
Question is,
The question is, are there documents that prove that it's going to cost us, our taxes are going to go through the roof if we were an Elmore independent school as compared to being part of the unified union?
okay. Can anyone answer that?
Documents, specific or where we can go look at it.
Come on, Stuart.
The last study we did was 7.5 years ago. And yes, we have documentation on that, massive amounts. We haven't done a study since then. We don't know what the options are, which is one of the questions that we have in this process is, let's find out what the options are before we make a decision. Yes, we have documentation for the decision that we made 7.5 years ago.
And if we want to look at tax rates before mergers, which would tell you how much we've tried to save over the last 7 years. Tax rates pre-merger, tax year 2015, 2016, tax rate was 1.6837. Tax rate for this year is slightly less than that. Therefore, for 7 years now, we've kept the tax rate, because of what we did in the schools, lower than it had been before merger. So that's a fact.
Okay. Yes, sir.
The comment that I would make about the models of 7 years ago is that they were highly influenced by incentives and basically disincentives in Act 46. Those no longer exist, so that model is not valid anymore.
Okay. Any more questions? We are pretty much out of time. So anything on Zoom? No. Okay, thank you all very much for coming. Please vote and tell your neighbors to do so on the first. So
This meeting will be available on Zoom. If you want to watch it, and there will be an attempt to make meeting minutes.
thank you all. Yeah. Sure. Thank you, Alice.